Hello, this is Jane, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 5th issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And I'm going to start with an article that's on the front page. In fact, it's the headline, and it's titled A Common Cause, Carney Extols Australia Ties, Hardens Stance on Military Action in War. And this is by Alex Ballingall. Canberra. Prime Minister Mark Carney would not rule out military involvement in the spiraling Middle East war, stressing the possible need to defend Canadians and allies as the deadly conflict threatens to widen. Carney also appeared Thursday to harden his stance when he declined to call for an immediate ceasefire, saying the stated war aims of the United States and Israel to eliminate Iran's capacity to build nuclear weapons and sponsor terrorism had not been achieved. While we want to see a broader de-escalation of these hostilities, including with the participation of other countries impacted by the violence, Carney said, we recognize and stress that cannot be achieved unless we're in a position where Iran's ability to acquire nuclear weapon and to export terrorism is ended. Carney's position tracked closely with that of Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who welcomed the Canadian leader to a joint session of Parliament on Thursday. Carney addressed the House of Representatives, delivering a remix of his famous Davos speech tailored to his Australian audience. After entering the country's modern, sprawling Parliament building to a 19-gun salute and an honor guard of soldiers, Carney delivered a plea for common cause, extolling Australia and Canada as strategic cousins. After signing a series of accords, including partnerships on critical minerals stockpiling and development, the promotion of clean energy, and collaboration on military production and national defense, Carney and Albanese took questions in a sunny courtyard. The leaders were among the few to quickly express support for last Saturday's American and Israeli airstrikes on Iran, a position that prompted criticism within liberal circles in Canada, with figures such as former Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy describing it as recklessness. After traveling to Australia from India this week, Carney told reporters that he took that position with regret, but maintained that Canada must support the strikes despite his view that they likely violated international law. The Charter of the United Nations prohibits the use of force unless it is endorsed by the body's Security Council, which did not happen in this case. Since the violence broke out, Carney has expressed Canada's opposition to Iran's Islamist regime, which he blames for supporting terrorism and killing scores of Canadians in the 2020 downing of an airliner taking off from Tehran. At the same time, the conflict has spread, with Iran launching attacks on countries in the Middle East that host U.S. military bases. Countries like the United Kingdom and France have also said they will move troops into the region. On a day when Turkey, a North Atlantic Treaty Organization ally that Canada is treaty-bound to defend, shot down an incoming drone, Carney said any Canadian military involvement remained hypothetical. But given the spreading violence in recent days, he did not say it is impossible. The country needs to defend its citizens or its allies. One can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies when it makes sense, Carney said, drawing a distinction between offensive actions of the United States and Israel that started the conflict and defending against attacks. We will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies. On that score, Carney said he came to Australia this week to reaffirm Canada's relationship with Canberra as the first Prime Minister to stage an official visit since Stephen Harper in 2007. We may look to different skies, the North Star in our hemisphere, the Southern Cross in yours, but we have the same orientation. We share a common heritage, have developed a common perspective, and can build a common future. A day after overseeing a new accord between large Australian and Canadian investment funds, which included a target to pump $10 billion of investment into Canada, the countries agreed to work on updating tax and investment treaties and ease the two-way flow of money. The outreach and warm welcome for Carney came with repeated references from both leaders to their shared desire to see middle powers like Canada and Australia work together to reduce the risks of their reliance on superpowers like the United States and China. That can be seen in U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff policy, which Carney said a day earlier in Sydney was being used to dictate policies in other countries. In his speech Thursday, Carney framed Canada and Australia as two nations whose strength in this new context comes from the trust they have built over years as reliable trading partners with stable systems of law and government. The institutional depth we share, our friendship forged by shared value and common battles, creates a trust that is a strategic asset, a source of power, Carney said. Two nations under different skies with the same orientation, a friendship built over a century that is ready to build the century that awaits, he concluded. Australia's Prime Minister was slated to host Carney for a private dinner Thursday evening before the Canadian leader departed for Japan, the final stop on his Indo-Pacific tour. And the next article on the front page has a byline of City Hall. Tories' exit shakes up mayoral race. Candidate rumors swirl as Michael Ford mulls run for office. And this is by Ben Spur. If John Tory's announcement that he wasn't running briefly clarified Toronto's mayor's race Tuesday, by Wednesday, the picture looked murky again, as rumors of new challengers swirled and the only declared candidate sought to seize his moment. The path to victory for that candidate, Councillor Bradford Beaches in East York, looked a lot clearer in the wake of Tory's surprise announcement. But even as Tory's exit inched Bradford closer to solidifying himself as the consensus center-right challenger to progressive incumbent Olivia Chow, he still has major hurdles to clear. Some members of the powerful political machine that propelled Tory to successive victories are rooting for Bradford's defeat, and there is already talk about another high-profile candidate waiting in the wings to take up the former mayor's mantle. Then on Wednesday afternoon came another twist with Michael Ford, the nephew of Premier Doug Ford and late Mayor Rob Ford, confirming he's considering what would be an eye-catching mayoral run. This will no doubt be a pivotal election. Public service has always been an integral part of my life, and it is for that reason that I am giving a campaign consideration, Ford said in a statement. At a news conference across from City Hall Wednesday, Bradford, who announced last fall he would run in the October 26, 2026 race, renewed his pitch to voters. In 236 days, Torontonians are going to have a choice about the future of this city. Do you want more of the same, or do you want something better? Do you want status quo, or do you want something different? Bradford said to assembled news cameras. He promised to offer change for a city that has been captivated by mediocrity and deliver basic services such as transit, snow clearing, and recreation programs at a higher standard than under Chow, while tackling grime and congestion. Bradford has been Council's most vocal critic of Chow, who has yet to announce her campaign but is expected to run, hammering her over tax increases and what he's called financial mismanagement. Many observers felt his best hope for victory this fall would be if Tory stayed out of the race. Bradford is a former ally of Tories, and the pair would risk splitting the center-right vote if they both ran. And while Tory, a former Ontario PC leader, won 3 mayoral elections between 2014 and 2022 before resigning in 2023 over an inappropriate relationship with a staffer, Bradford placed 8th in the 2023 by-election to replace him with about 1.3% of the vote. In order to improve on that showing, Bradford has spent months positioning himself as the strongest center-right candidate to take on Chow, including making his pitch to Liberal and Conservative members of Toronto's political establishment at a Royal York Hotel event last June. But while organizers who previously backed Tory might be expected to help Bradford's campaign, now that Tory is staying out, it's not a given those powerful supporters will flock to the councillor. Sources close to the former mayor said Bradford has alienated people in Tory's circle with what they described as an aggressive with me or against me approach and political attacks against Tory. Since Bradford announced his latest campaign, he has said it's time to turn the page on yesterday's leaders, seen as a dig at both Chow, who's 68, and Tory, 71. That's angered some who feel Bradford owes more deference to Tory, who helped give him his start in politics by endorsing his 2018 council campaign. Bradford split with Tory after the former mayor backed Anna Belayo over Bradford in the 2023 by-election. Nick Kouvalis, a pollster and key strategist for Tory and Belayo, said Bradford's public and private criticism of Tory has dissuaded him from supporting Bradford this time. His personal attacks against John Tory and unrelenting disloyal behavior has left a very bad taste in my mouth. There are other people who feel the same way, said Kouvalis. There is zero chance that I will work for Brad. I would sooner help Olivia defeat Brad, Kouvalis said. Bradford has not exactly endeared himself to a lot of people who would be in the Tory camp, said a second source close to the former mayor, who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive political deliberations. A third Tory ally said, "As it stands now, I'd be one of those people that does everything to ensure Brad doesn't win." At his news conference, Bradford brushed off the suggestion that he has damaged relationships with those he hoped would back him. "I'm not trying to alienate anybody, you know. I love everyone. I'm trying to work with everybody," he said. In a statement, he said he was focused on building the biggest, most serious coalition possible to fix Toronto, and that he was grateful for Tory's service to the city. A source close to Bradford, who asked to remain anonymous to discuss the campaign before it officially starts, pushed back against the pollsters and self-described insiders who were openly rooting for a coronation for John Tory. Erstwhile Tory backers looking for a right-leaning challenger besides Bradford to support could find one in former Ontario PC Finance Minister Rod Phillips, whose name has been mentioned as a possible candidate. A one-time chief of staff to Mayor Mel Lastman, he is currently chair of Toronto Global, the agency that attracts business investment to the city, and was in Mumbai this week as part of Prime Minister Mark Carney's trade delegation to India. Phillips hasn't said he plans to run, but a source close to him, speaking confidentially in order to discuss internal deliberations, said he has been inundated with calls and texts urging him to run since Tory's announcement. As a conservative businessman, he's cut from the same cloth as Tory and likely wouldn't have a viable campaign if Tory was in the race. Nominations open May 1 and close August 21. Michael Ford's potential to enter into the race would further shake up the field. He confirmed in a text to the Star he was giving strong consideration to run, citing crime, congestion, and higher property taxes as key issues. The former Ontario PC MPP for York South Weston would likely compete with Bradford for right-leaning voters and potentially have a powerful backer in his uncle at Queen's Park. The younger Ford, 32, was a city councillor from 2016 to 2022 and was elected MPP in 2022. After taking a leave of absence from his post as Minister of Citizenship and Multiculturalism for health reasons in January 2025, announced he wouldn't seek re-election. Last June, he registered as a lobbyist at Toronto City Hall and recently joined the PR firm of former CBC host Travis Donraj. And I must pause for a moment to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article I'm going to read is titled Protesters Clash with Police at Rally Over OSAP Changes. Post-secondary students accuse Premier of limiting access to education. And this is by Kristen Rushowy. Hundreds of protesters descended on Queen's Park on Wednesday to rally against provincial changes to student financial aid, a protest that grew heated with dozens of officers flooding to the scene. College and university students, as well as those from various political organizations, were on the front lawn of the Ontario Legislature all afternoon, carrying signs that read, Ford's cuts equal less opportunities, and also I love weaving baskets, among others, and chanting hands off our education and F Doug Ford. But things later got heated after a statue on the grounds was defaced with red spray paint and police took a person into custody. Confrontations between police and protesters soon arrived, with dozens of officers arriving. At its peak, up to 50 police cars were parked along Queen's Park Crescent, which circles the building. Toronto police said 2 arrests were made for mischief and assaulting and obstructing police, and that more information would be released. Starting this fall, 75% of OSAP funds provided to students will be loans and 25% non-repayable grants, essentially a reversal of the current 15% loan and 85% grant split. The change also comes with a 2% yearly tuition increase. The government announced the change last month, along with a funding boost of $6.4 billion over the next 4 years for the sector, as schools have been cutting staff and programming and closing campuses. Latacia Walker Reynolds, a journalism student at Seneca Polytechnique, said she has received grants and loans from OSAP, and the changes are going to affect me and my family significantly. I'm the oldest of 5 children with a single mom, and we're struggling enough as it is with how OSP is distributed, she said. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but it's really not enough. In this economy, I'm working part-time, and I'm not even getting enough hours to support myself, and this is really going to drive us into debt. If I can't afford to go to school, I'll have to drop out, she added. Critics have accused the government of forcing students to take on larger amounts of debt to pursue a post-secondary education at a time when affordability is a huge concern. But Premier Doug Ford has defended the move, saying the province was under immense pressure to end his 7-year college and university tuition freeze, and student aid costs were spiraling in part because of changes by the federal government. The premier has received many calls from students and said he suggested they choose programs for in-demand careers, adding, because a lot of the students, you're picking basket weaving courses, and there's not too many baskets being sold out there. A spokesperson for colleges and universities, Minister Nolan Quinn, said the new loan grant ratio is more in line with other provinces. To restore sustainability to OSAP and ensure its availability for future generations, our government is aligning Ontario's student financial support framework with other jurisdictions across Canada, said Bianca Giacoboni, noting that a separate fund will provide additional aid for low-income students. The rally was organized by the Ontario branch of the Canadian Federation of Students, and campaigns and communications coordinator Ades Mabalaja said more are planned. The combination of a tuition increase and more loans is keeping the poor and marginalized out of education, Mabalaja said. Okay, the next article is under the byline Toronto District School Board. Parents livid at special education as an optional priority on survey. Board staff accused of basing budget on popularity contest. This is by Isabel Teotanio. Parents of children with special education needs and advocacy groups are livid over a Toronto Public School Board survey about which areas to prioritize in the upcoming budget. The Toronto District School Board posted an online survey this week, open to community members for about 2 weeks, seeking input on what to prioritize next year. It lists 10 key areas such as classroom resources, reading and math supports, and school maintenance. It also includes special education supports and resources, educational assistance, specialized programs, and assistive technology. We're livid. This is appalling, said David Lepofsky, chair of the TDSB Special Education Advisory Committee, made up of members from organizations that represent parents of kids with disabilities or special education needs. The duty to provide effective special education funding is not an option. It's not subject to a popularity contest, he told The Star, noting it's a requirement under the education law. Lepofsky said this year's survey is inexcusable because last year the board issued a similar one with the same list, asking parents about possible areas for budget cuts. That generated outrage, prompting senior staff and the Board of Trustees to apologize. The Star asked the TDSB why it launched this year's survey, given last year's backlash and apologies. A board spokesperson defended the move, saying last year's survey was about potential areas to reduce spending and find efficiencies, whereas the current version is about priorities. This year's survey asks respondents to identify and rank the priorities that they believe the board should focus spending on in the upcoming budget to support student achievement and well-being, she said via email. Each year, a survey is shared with TDSB stakeholders to inform the annual budget process. And this year's survey asks respondents to rank 5 of 10 priorities to identify how to place resources where they are needed most to help students succeed. Special education supports and resources is one of these priority areas. Other supervised boards, there are now 7 the province has taken over, have similar surveys. At a special education advisory committee meeting this week, parent Leo Lagnato, who represents Autism Ontario on the committee, told senior staff it doesn't matter if the semantics of the survey are about cuts or about budget. When you prioritize something, you are trying to decide funding allocation. You already apologized for this before, and quite frankly, this is appalling that special education is once again listed in a prioritization exercise, said Lagnato. It is insulting. In a letter to TDSB, Supervisor Rohit Gupta sent Wednesday and shared with the Star, Lepovsky wrote on behalf of the committee, saying it is wrong and palpably harmful to include special education supports in a ranking-style budget survey. It signals to families of the 250,000 TDSB students that spending on special education is optional or open to being deprioritized. And for parents of roughly 40,000 kids with special education needs, this can only instill fear that their child's services and supports are at risk of being defunded or deprioritized, depending on public opinion. He said that fear is made worse given recent actions by the TDSB that include raising the maximum class size in 2 categories of special education classes, taking steps that appear to signal the eventual closing of 2 high schools for teens with special needs, and no longer live streaming or archiving video from Special Education Advisory Committee meetings, so parents must attend in person. Last year, facing a significant deficit, the TDSB issued its 2025-26 budget survey seeking input on how to prioritize our spending and asked parents to rank 10 areas in order of importance. At a May 2025 SEAC meeting, members called for an apology, and Associate Director Louise Sarisco apologized for the unintended harm. The next month, the Board of Trustees voted in favor of a formal apology. And I'm going to pause once more to remind you that you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is also related to education, and the title is Pair from Think Tank to Review EQAO. Teacher Union said it's left out of look at student testing. And this is by Christian Rashowi. The head of a think tank and an economics professor have been tasked with reviewing the province's standardized testing system, which the education minister ordered after results in literacy and numeracy stalled. William Robson, the longtime president and CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute, will chair the advisory body on student achievement and assessment. And David Johnson of Wilfrid Laurier University, an expert on education policy who also works with C.D. Howe, will be an advisor. After the Education Quality and Accountability Office reported small gains in reading, writing, and math scores in the last round of testing students in grades 3, 6, and 9, Education Minister Paul Calandra said that was unacceptable and that results were not improving fast enough. Calandra has asked the pair to not only look at the achievement gaps, but also for ways to better support teachers and students. About half of grade 6 students and 58% of grade 9 students meet the provincial standard in math, which is roughly a B grade or better. About 74% of grade 3 students meet it in reading and 65% do in writing. Critics have said the results show the government needs to provide improved resources to classrooms, and some parents said the province should be targeting help to struggling schools. Student achievement must always come first in Ontario's education system, Calandra said in a written statement Wednesday. While there has been progress in recent years, too many students are still not meeting provincial standards. Our government will continue using every tool available to keep Ontario's education system focused on accountability and a back-to-basics approach to support student achievement so that students can reach their full potential. The advisor will earn $1,500 a day. Martha Radoy, president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, said the government needs to consult educators on any changes to EQAO testing. Hundreds of our members applied to contribute their real-life classroom experience to this review, she said. Instead, the government has appointed think tank and academic advisors who will earn $1,500 a day. If the goal is to improve EQAO and student learning, teachers and education workers working directly with students need to be part of the process. And the next article is titled, Ottawa Working to Charter Flights for Canadians. Foreign Minister says about 2,000 requested help. This is by Mark Ramsey. Canada is working to secure permission from the United Arab Emirates to use its partially open airspace for government-chartered flights out of the conflict-stricken Middle East, Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand said Wednesday, describing a dangerous situation in the Middle East where U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran have provoked a regional war. Anand told a news conference that sheltering in place was the general advice across the board, but Ottawa was arranging help for many of the 106,000 Canadians registered in the region who want to get out. She said 2,035 Canadians have requested assistance to leave the region, and Ottawa would help through a mix of chartered planes, booked airline seats on commercial flights, and ground transportation. However, it appeared the Canadian government had not yet arranged the confirmed departures for that many people as of Wednesday evening, and Canadians in Iran had fewer options with no diplomatic ties between Canada and the Iranian regime. I want to speak directly now to Canadians in the Middle East and the Gulf region, Anand said. Your government is with you. We are working hard for you, and we are arranging options for you to leave the region. About half of those Canadians requesting help are in the UAE, where airstrikes have hit resorts in Dubai and the airport in Abu Dhabi. getting chartered flights out of the country is contingent on the United Arab Emirates' approval. Anand said, although she said Canada was working on booking seats on commercial flights as well, which government officials described in a briefing as a more efficient route. Canada helped 75 Canadians get out of Lebanon on a commercial flight Wednesday morning, with 200 more seats available in the coming days, Anand said, issuing a stark warning about the potential of falling debris from intercepted strikes. She said Qatar Airways was arranging bus transportation for another 200 Canadians to fly out from Saudi Arabia, but she advised Canadians in the area not to attempt ground travel unless it is safe to do so. I understand that being in a building such as a hotel while missiles are flying overhead is terrifying, Anand said. It is, however, often the safer option. The Israeli government was also sending buses heading to Egypt, and 67 Canadians have left the country, government officials said. Although 74 Canadians have requested help leaving Iran, Anand said Canada has no ability to help on the ground because it has no diplomatic ties with the Islamic regime and its armed forces. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that's IRGC, are listed as a terrorist group. But Canada has sent more consular officials to neighboring Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Israel, Jordan, and Turkmenistan to help Canadians who make it across the border, Anand said. Hundreds have died in the hostilities, primarily in Iran, where a missile strike on a school killed 165 schoolgirls and staff. No Canadians had been reported injured or killed as of Wednesday morning, Global Affairs Canada said. In a briefing to reporters, government officials could not say how many Canadians out of the nearly 3,000 in Iran have made it out. They described a security situation that has deteriorated rapidly in recent days, leading to deeply concerning times for Canadians in or with ties to the region. Earlier Wednesday, Anand told Canadians in the region to prepare departure plans that do not solely rely on the Government of Canada assistance. Government officials said in their Wednesday update that all options remained on the table. Okay, the next article is titled Crown Closes Sexual Assault Case. Complainants doubt around dates could wipe out one charge against auto parts billionaire. And this is by Betsy Powell. Prosecutors have closed their case against Frank Stronach after a Toronto court heard from 7 women over the past 3 weeks, each alleging they were sexually assaulted by the auto parts billionaire between 1977 and 1990. The Crown called only one corroborating witness who testified briefly on Wednesday. Defense lawyer Leora Shemesh told the court she will begin calling evidence on Monday, though she did not say whether her 93-year-old client will take the stand. When the case got underway last month, Stronach was facing 12 sexual offenses under the criminal code, but that number is being whittled down. This week, the Crown withdrew one charge relating to allegations made by an ex-nurse and has asked that a second charge tied to her be withdrawn. Superior Court Justice Anne Malloy agreed, but must still rule on Shemesh's request to find Stronach not guilty on that count. In addition, Shemesh told Malloy on Wednesday that she was seeking directed verdicts on charges linked to 2 other complainants. The judge will hear arguments Friday. In one case, Stronach is charged with the sexual assault of a former Rooney's waitress, now 62, who alleges that in her 20s, While at Stronach's lakeside condo, he pushed her against the wall, groped her, and attempted to kiss her. She ended up working for Magna for about 6 years. Stronach was charged under the law as it was after January 1983, but during the woman's testimony, she acknowledged the incident may have taken place in 1982. The prosecution is stuck with that date because it can't be amended, Sheemish explained outside of court. Canada overhauled its sexual offense laws in January 1983 with legislation that abolished the offenses of rape and indecent assault and replaced them with a new, broader set of sexual assault offenses. If a complainant says the act occurred in 1982, then legally the alleged conduct falls under the pre-1983 offenses, rape, attempted rape, indecent assault, etc., not under the post-1983 offense of sexual assault. The Crown cannot convict someone of an offense that did not exist at the time of the alleged conduct. In the second case, Sheemish is asking the judge to toss one of 2 charges related to a woman now 73. She testified that in 1977, Stronach pushed her over an armchair, lifted her skirt, and tried to rape me. She said she then fled the apartment and had no further contact with him. Sheemish says the woman's narrative does not meet the definition of attempted rape as it is written in the criminal code at the time. According to the woman's evidence, he was clothed and she was clothed, and there was no penetration. It just doesn't seem like an offense they could ever meet, the lawyer said. He is, however, still charged with indecent assault as it relates to her, and that is something he could be convicted of, potentially, if the judge believes her evidence and finds her to be a credible and reliable witness, Sheemish said. Sheemish has not indicated whether Stronach will testify. Her first witness next week will be police officers, she said in court. During the cross-examination of the final witness, a 69-year-old businesswoman, Sheemish accused her of lying or misleading the court multiple times, such as claiming not to have read another complainant's account in the Star, and during the preliminary hearing, omitting that she had spoken to civil lawyers before going to the police. The witness maintained she thought such information was privileged. On Wednesday, before wrapping up her cross-examination, Sheemish suggested the woman had lied about how successful she is, saying she did so to show the judge how busy and important you are, and to convince her she is not in it for the money. The woman stated in court that she has not filed a lawsuit against Stronach. The prosecution also signaled that it isn't proceeding with one of 3 charges connected to the final witness, which also relates to the timing of the offense. Okay, before I go on to the next article, I am going to pause and remind you you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the next article is under the byline Project South. Police Board Chair defends Watchdog's corruption probe. Councillor says Ontario agency exists for moments just like this. And this is by Jennifer Pagliaro. The chair of the Toronto Police Oversight Board is asking citizens to trust in the investigation started by Ontario's Inspectorate of Policing into corrupt officers. Councillor Shelley Carroll's comments at the outset of Wednesday's police board meeting seemed to respond to criticism about the province's review of all 45 police forces in Ontario, spurred by the arrests of 7 current Toronto cops and 1 retired constable in an operation known as Project South. Concerns have been raised about the scope of the province's review, as well as the independence of the man leading it, Inspector General Brian Teschner, who was former executive director of the Toronto Police Service Board. Many members of the public are watching on this item. They should be, Carroll said. I want to be clear about why the Inspectorate of Policing is the right body to conduct this review at this time. Carroll and Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkiw had asked the Inspector General to conduct an independent inspection following the Project South arrests. In this case, it is exactly the tool that the province has put in place for moments just like this, Carroll added. She noted that that is a significant distinction from another process, such as a judicial inquiry, which makes recommendations but not directions. The Inspector General also does not have to wait for the criminal prosecutions to have concluded to conduct its work, she said. She noted that the Law Enforcement Complaints Agency, an arm's-length body under the Attorney General's office, is also investigating the alleged misconduct of the individual officers and could recommend professional discipline. Carroll's comments came ahead of Demkiw officially presenting his plan to launch an anti-corruption project that will look at how officers are supervised, the use of police databases, and substance abuse among members. The board voted to support the inspectorate and LECA processes, urging those reviews to happen as expeditiously as reasonably possible, as well as requesting the service provide regular updates about any issues related to Project South. Several of those accused appeared for the first time in court Tuesday, with their case next scheduled after a standard 12-week adjournment. And here's an article under the byline of York Region. Officials warn of measles exposure on multiple bus routes. And this is by Femi Dawadu. York Region Police Health has issued a warning after confirming a person who contracted measles outside of Canada visited several public locations and York Region Transit, that's YRT, bus routes while contagious, potentially exposing members of the public to the highly infectious disease. The statement identified 6 exposure sites, including the Cortellucci Vaughan Hospital's emergency department and multiple YRT bus routes serving Richmond Hill, Markham, Vaughan, and parts of Toronto. The exposures occurred between February 23 and last Saturday. The statement also warns that anyone who was present at these sites during the listed times is urged to confirm their measles vaccination status and monitor for symptoms until at least March 21, depending on their exposure date. In a separate statement on Wednesday, Toronto Public Health, that's TPH, confirmed it is investigating a separate measles case with potential exposure identified on 2 Avianca flights and at Toronto Pearson International Airport's Terminal 1. The affected flights and times are Avianca Flight AV579, Guatemala City to San Salvador on February 21, Avianca Flight AV324, San Salvador to Toronto on February 22, and Toronto Pearson International Airport Terminal 1 arrivals on February 22 between 1:40 p.m. and 4:10 p.m. York Regional Public Health advises anyone who believes they might have been exposed to the virus to take several actions, including confirming that they and members of their family have received 2 doses of the measles vaccine. That's MMR or MMRV. People who were at any of the exposure sites, especially those with infants under 12 months or weakened immune systems, are advised to contact York Region Public Health immediately at 1-877-464-9675, extension 77280. Preventative treatment may be available in these cases, reads the statement. Members of the public experiencing symptoms are warned to stay home and not attend work or school and call health care professionals before visiting. There were 5,460 reported cases of measles in Canada in 2025, with 2,397 in Ontario. And the next article is titled, Ghost Agents, and those are in parentheses, Add to Visa Challenges. Unauthorized actors profit from immigration processing delays, contribute to growing backlog. This is by Nicholas Keong. After a 2-week vacation back home in China, Amber was ready to return to work as a management consultant in Canada. But she didn't realize her work visa had expired until she was refused boarding for her flight. What the Toronto resident did next would land her in a Canadian government dragnet. Officials were pursuing people using the services of unauthorized agents who profit from immigration processing delays and play a part in the federal court's growing backlog. Amber, a former international student on a post-graduation work permit, submitted a new work visa application from China in 2024. After 5 weeks of waiting, still without the document to come back to Canada, she looked to the popular Chinese e-commerce platform, Zhongkongshu, or Little Red Book, for advice. There she found someone purporting to be a lawyer advertising that he could help force immigration to speed up visa processing for applicants. Anxious that she'd lose her job over prolonged unpaid leave, she e-transferred $600 for the service to prepare what she later learned is known as a mandamus application in court. Court can order government officials to process immigration files that are unreasonably delayed. Amber said the scramble in 2024 was far from her mind until recently, when she found herself caught in a legal quagmire with 430 immigration applicants. It involves Chinese applicants who have applied for study, work, or visitor permits. They all had asked the court to review the processing delays of their files and to order Ottawa to fast-track the application. The Department of Justice accused them of misrepresentation by using unauthorized representatives to prepare their court applications. These applications were flagged because they all had similar format, style, and phrasing, and shared the same home addresses, phone numbers, and email accounts, despite the applicants claiming to have self-represented. It has also asked the court to order these applicants to pay $720 to the government in costs. The use of unscrupulous ghost agents has posed an ongoing challenge for immigration officials and legal profession regulators because they operate behind the scenes and cannot be held accountable. Their incompetence can also lead to dire consequences for applicants and abuse of the immigration and legal systems. Amber, who asked that her full name not be published for fear of repercussions, said newcomers are unfamiliar with the Canadian judicial system, and she had no idea it's unlawful to hire an unauthorized representative to submit court applications. I personally didn't think what this guy did was a problem, recalled a confused Amber. My visa was approved within 48 hours after he submitted the mandamus. I actually wrote him and thanked him because I was grateful. He provided a valuable service. I'm sure none of the 430 people knew what a mandamus was. Amber said she sought help for her visa application out of desperation because the processing time had already surpassed what was listed on the Immigration Department website. She had the immigration hotline from abroad. She called the immigration hotline from abroad multiple times, but the line was cut off after she followed through the lengthy menu. Her local MP could only provide her updates on the status of the visa and was unable to push for her case. The root of the problem is really about immigration processing times, right? Said Amber. It's not just processing times, but also the lack of transparency and communication from immigration officials. It's like a black box. No one can tell you what has happened to your application and what's holding it up. In its motion to dismiss the 430 mandamus applications, many with visas still pending, the government argued it's the most expeditious and economical resolution as the court struggles with a growing backlog and wait time for hearings. Immigration-related cases make up the majority of the workload in the federal court, which has seen a surge in new immigration proceedings in recent years, from 7,782 in 2019 to 24,667 in 2024. It already reached 21,581 in the first 9 months of 2025, and the wait time for a hearing keeps growing. I'm not going to be able to finish this whole article, but I will jump to the end. The Immigration Department urges applicants to use its official website for program information to avoid becoming victims of fraud or scams, adding that its Protect Yourself from Immigration Fraud webpage is meant to raise public awareness. The best way to protect the public from fraud is to inform the public, and this information is regularly promoted on our social media platforms, the department said. The Star has contacted the agent by email and phone, but did not receive a response. And I will end with, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 5 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.